Third-person omniscient point of view is tricky, and most new writers are getting it wrong. Are you confusing omniscient narration with head-hopping? Are you drowning your readers in exposition dumps? Is your all-knowing narrator about as interesting as a stale chip? If any of this sounds familiar, let's fix that. If you're new here, my name is Brianna, and I post writing videos every week on world building, character development, narrative techniques, and other writing-related things. I also make easy-to-use writing workbooks on my Etsy shop, so if you're interested, hit subscribe and feel free to follow me on Threads, Instagram, or TikTok. All links are in the description below. Now, I've already covered first-person, third-person limited, and third-person multiple perspective. Those videos are up on my channel if you want to check them out. But today, we're tackling the granddaddy of all point of view challenges, third-person omniscient. This is arguably the most difficult point of view to master, and I see writers stumbling over the same 6 mistakes over and over again. So before we dive into the mistakes, let's make sure we're on the same page about what third-person omniscient narration actually is. Third-person omniscient point of view uses an all-knowing narrator who exists outside of the story and has access to every character's thoughts, feelings, and motivations. Think of it as having a godlike storyteller who can zoom in and out of any character's mind, jump across time and space, and provide third-party commentary on the action that you wouldn't get with other perspectives. The key difference between this and other third-person point of views is the scope of knowledge. Third-person limited stays locked between one character, third-person multiple switches between several characters, but third-person omniscient, your narrator knows everything about everyone, everywhere, all at once. This point of view technique dominated classic literature. Think Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, George Eliot. The narrator often has a distinct personality and voice, and sometimes even addresses the reader directly. It's like having Charles Dickens himself sitting by the fireplace telling you the story of Oliver Twist, while occasionally pausing to share his opinions on Victorian society. The omniscient narrator can reveal information no character knows, provide historical context, offer moral commentary, and move freely through time and space. It's incredibly powerful and incredibly easy to mess up. That said, let's break down the 6 mistakes new writers typically make when writing in third-person omniscient narration. Mistake number 1, confusing omniscience with head-hopping. Just because an omniscient narrator can access multiple characters' thoughts, it doesn't mean they can just jump from head to head whenever they feel like it. That's not omniscience, that's head-hopping, and it can be quite jarring to read if you're not expecting it. True omniscient narration maintains a consistent narrator voice that guides readers through different perspectives. The narrator is telling you what characters think, not the characters themselves. Otherwise, that's third-person limited or multiple. So let's do an example using the same characters that I did in my last video: Finn the Prince, Lyra the Dragon Tamer, and Rowan the leader of the rebellion. So instead of writing, Lyra crept through the dragon's lair, her heart racing with terror. The ancient beast stirred in its sleep, sensing her presence. Finn waited outside the cave, desperate to help, but knowing he'd only get in the way. His sword felt useless against such a creature. Heat and hunger permeated the dragon's dreams, but there was a sweet taste of fear in the air that brought it steadily out of its slumber. Try, Lyra crept through the dragon's lair, her heart racing with terror, unaware that the ancient beast had already sensed her presence. Outside the cave, Finn paced with desperate energy, his hand gripping a sword he knew would be useless against such a creature. The dragon itself drifted through dreams of burning villages, its slumber growing lighter as the scent of human fear filled the air. Now, this example and the rest of my examples aren't perfect. I just quickly put them together for the sake of this video, but I hope you can see how the second version maintains the omniscient narrator's voice throughout rather than jumping between the characters' perspectives. We get information from multiple sources, but it's all filtered through the narrator's voice. And this is the key difference between third-person omniscient and third-person limited and multiple. With third-person limited and multiple, your narration is colored by the characters' voices, like they're telling a story but referring to themselves in third person. But third-person omniscient has a totally separate person telling you the story, kind of like Morgan Freeman narrating a movie. Mistake number 2, excessive exposition and telling. One of the perks of omniscient narration is that you can tell the readers things directly, but that doesn't mean you have permission to dump information instead of weaving it naturally into the story. Just because you can tell doesn't mean you should tell everything. Use the narrator's knowledge strategically, and remember that even omniscient narration benefits from showing important moments through action and dialogue rather than exposition. So instead of Rowan was a natural leader who had always been good at inspiring others, he came from a poor background and had worked hard to earn respect among the rebels. His tactical mind was sharp, and he understood both the political landscape and military strategy. This is why the other rebels trusted him completely, despite his young age of 23. Try, Rowan studied the map of the capital, his calloused fingers a testament to years of manual labor before the rebellion, tracing potential routes. At 23, he was younger than most of his lieutenants, yet they leaned forward to catch his every word. Perhaps it was the way he never asked them to take risks he wouldn't take himself. Or perhaps it was simply that Rowan had a gift for seeing 3 moves ahead while his enemies were still planning their first. The second version reveals the same information, but does it through concrete details and demonstrates his leadership rather than just stating it. It also reads more cinematic, and it keeps you immersed in the scene rather than pulling you out of the scene to explain the info as an aside. The third mistake, having a weak or inconsistent narrator voice. It's easy to fall into the pit where you make your omniscient narrator basically invisible. They're just a bland or generic voice voice telling information. But the narrator is essentially a character, and they need personality because they're essentially giving a voiceover commentary of the story. So that commentary should be engaging and dynamic. Develop your omniscient narrator as if they're a character in their own right. What's their attitude toward the story? Are they wise and compassionate, witty and sardonic, or something else entirely? And you want to keep this voice consistent throughout. So instead of writing, the royal court was filled with intrigue. Many nobles had competing interests, political alliances were constantly shifting. Try, the royal court was a viper's nest wrapped in silk and gold, where a smile could be more dangerous than a dagger and yesterday's ally might become tomorrow's executioner. One could hardly blame the nobles for their paranoia. In a place where survival depended on reading the subtext of every conversation, trust was a luxury few could afford. This version shows the narrator's perspective and attitude toward the court and makes them feel like a real presence in the story rather than a bland information delivery system. Mistake number 4, giving characters information they should not know. Sometimes writers get so caught up in the narrator's omniscience that they forget that the characters themselves are not omniscient. And so characters start knowing things that they have no logical way of knowing. Try to keep track of what each character knows versus what the narrator knows, like in a separate sheet that evolves throughout the story. Characters should only act on information they've reasonably acquired through experiences, conversations, or observations. So instead of writing, Finn nodded gravely. The dragon's weakness is a soft spot on its neck, and it can only breathe fire 3 times before needing to rest. Lyra stared at him in amazement, wondering how he came by this information. Even Lyra doesn't know how he knows this. Try writing it as, there was only one adventurer who knew about the soft spot on the dragon's neck. It was a tiny patch, wrinkled and raised like a battle scar, which it very well was. It hadn't healed well. One lead-tipped arrow was all that was needed to sever the nerve between its mouth and fire lung. Finn stared at the adventurer's mangled skeleton splayed across the pile of gold. He hadn't yet noticed the quiver dangling from the foot. Apparently, he whispered, recalling what he had overheard at the tavern, that they're slower after breathing fire. I don't know how much truth there is to that. Lyra nodded, keeping her voice equally quiet. They can only breathe fire 3 times before needing to rest. The second version maintains the distinction between what the omniscient narrator knows and what the characters can reasonably know. As a prince, Finn doesn't have much experience with dragons, but Lyra the dragon tamer has much more knowledge. However, only the narrator knows that the dragon has an old wound on its neck that can sever its ability to breathe fire. Mistake number 5 is having an inconsistent point of view throughout the story. Some writers start their story with omniscient narration and then gradually slip into third-person limited without realizing it, or they randomly switch between the 2 modes without clear intention. Remember, an omniscient narrator is another person entirely who is telling you what a different character is experiencing, not as if they're the one experiencing it. So before you even start writing your book, decide whether you're really going to write in true omniscient narration and then stick with it. Don't start your story with broad omniscient observations and insights about the characters, and then suddenly spend 3 chapters locked into Lyra's perspective with no broader narrator, and then randomly jump back into omniscient mode when it's convenient. Maintain a consistent omniscient narrator voice throughout, where the narrator always feels present and in control even when closely focusing on one character's experience. The narrator's voice and knowledge level should also remain consistent. Now, if you find yourself wanting to deep dive intimately into a character's head for long stretches to really encapsulate their emotions and senses, then you might actually want third-person limited or third-person multiple point of view instead, which again, I have videos on, so check those out after this. And the 6th mistake, creating too much distance from characters. Omniscient narration naturally creates distance between the reader and the characters, but it's easy to take this too far and make the narrator so detached from the characters that the readers can't connect with anyone at all. Even with an omniscient narrator, readers need to care about your characters. Otherwise, they won't care about the story overall. Use the narrator's knowledge to deepen the emotional moments, not diminish them. And this is actually easier to do because the narrator can provide external context that makes us understand and emphasize more deeply with the characters. So instead of writing, Rowan felt sad about his sister's death. This affected his decision-making throughout the campaign. The loss made him more reckless in battle. Try, Rowan carried his sister's death like a stone in his lungs, and the rebels soon learned to read the signs when grief loomed over him. On those days, his tactics gave way to a reckless need for action, any action that might outrun the weight of memory. His sister would have scolded him for such foolishness, which only made the ache cut deeper. This version uses the narrator's knowledge to help us understand and feel Rowan's pain, rather than just reporting it like a journalist. So now that we've seen the mistakes, let's look at some great examples of third-person omniscient narration done in existing books. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, Little Woman by Louisa May Alcott, The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, which is not traditional third-person omniscient, but since the narrator is literally death, I thought I'd include it because death offers a unique style of omniscient perspective that adds depth and meaning to the story. And then Bleak House by Charles Dickens, which also includes first-person narration, so it makes for an interesting narrative duo. What makes these examples work is that each author understands that the narrator is essentially a character. The omniscient voice has personality, opinions, and a distinct way of telling the story that bolsters rather than detracts from the narrative. And they also use this as an opportunity to provide social commentary that reflects real-world issues that you can't necessarily achieve with non-omniscient narration. So here are my top 7 tips for excelling at third-person omniscient narration. 1. Develop your narrator as a character. Give your omniscient narrator a distinct voice, personality, and perspective. And think about their relationship to the story and the characters. 2. Play with power. An omniscient narrator is power, and you can do so much with it. Don't reveal everything just because you can. Create tension by withholding information and then reveal it at the right moments to create maximum impact. Or make them an unreliable narrator, where the reader has to work out whether they can even trust what they're reading, or if they have to look into the finer details of action and dialogue in order to understand what's really going on. 3. Maintain a consistent narrative distance. Decide how close or far away you want your narrator to be from the characters and then stick with it. Don't randomly zoom in or out without purpose. 4. Balance telling and showing. Omniscient narration allows for more telling than other point of views, but you still need to show important emotional moments and character development. 5. Respect your character's knowledge. Keep track of what your characters know versus what your narrator knows. Don't let your characters act on information they should not have. 6. Consider your story's needs. Omniscient narration is really tricky, so you should ask yourself if it will really serve your story. Do you need that broader scope and narrator commentary, or would another point of view work better? And 7. Study the masters. Read classic literature that use omniscient narration well. Pay attention to how those authors handle narrator voice, revealing information, and character development. I hope this video helped you. If you're thinking about writing in first person, third person limited, or third person multiple, check out my playlist here, which has all those videos on different narrative point of views. And if you're looking for affordable writing workbooks that don't compromise your creative freedom, check out my Etsy shop linked in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next chapter.